The first time Graham's palm struck the table and he commanded me to obey, I didn't cry. I remembered instead. Remembered my father's quiet lessons about power, his weathered hands cleaning his federal badge each night. Graham thought he'd married a woman he could diminish into shadow. He never asked why I'd stopped mentioning my dad, never wondered what kind of man had raised me. As I dialed that number I'd memorized since childhood, fingers trembling beneath surveillance cameras, I almost pitied my husband. The most dangerous mistake in his carefully controlled life was forgetting to ask who my father used to be. I met Graham on a Tuesday. It was one of those perfect autumn afternoons where the sun hangs low and everything seems bathed in gold. I was carrying too many books, rushing to my car after a staff meeting at Westwood Elementary where I worked as a school counselor. The books tumbled from my arms, scattering across the parking lot like startled birds. "Need a hand?" a voice asked, soft but confident. I looked up and there he was, tall, with kind eyes and a gentle smile that crinkled at the corners. As we gathered my things, our hands touched briefly, and I felt a small electric current pass between us. Something about his careful movements, the way he stacked the books precisely, made me feel safe. "I'm Graham Bennett," he said, extending his hand formally after we'd collected everything. "I work with the school district's fundraising committee." "Catherine Whitaker," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "School counselor." "Catherine," he repeated, like he was testing how my name felt on his tongue. "It suits you." Strong, classic. That was the beginning. Coffee dates where he listened, really listened, to my thoughts on childhood trauma and the education system. Dinners where he asked questions about my ideas, my dreams. Weekend hikes where he held my hand just firmly enough to help me over rough terrain, but never so tight that I couldn't pull away. "You're different," he told me 3 months in, his fingers tracing patterns on my wrist as we sat on his couch. "Most women I meet want to be taken care of. You've got fire. Independence. I respect that about you." I believed him. I believed every word. Dad wasn't so easily convinced. My father, Charles Whitaker, raised me alone after Mom died when I was 8. He never talked much about his work in federal law enforcement, but the discipline it instilled in him shaped our home life. He was a man of few words but deep conviction. The kind who communicated volumes with just a glance. "He's awfully polished," Dad commented after meeting Graham for the first time. We were washing dishes side by side in Dad's modest kitchen, the same way we had since I was tall enough to reach the sink. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, handing him a plate to dry. Dad shrugged, his weathered hands methodically wiping the ceramic. "Just an observation, Katie girl." "He respects me, Dad," I insisted, passing him another dish. "He values my mind, my career." Dad nodded, saying nothing, but his silence had weight to it. I knew that silence. It was the same one he used when I was 16 and dating Bobby Perkins, the silence that meant he was watching, evaluating, reserving judgment until he had all the facts. 6 months later, Graham proposed with a perfect diamond ring and carefully rehearsed words about partnership and respect. I said yes, without hesitation. The wedding was an elegant affair at the Bennett family estate, all ivory and soft blues, string quartet playing as I walked down the aisle on Dad's arm. I could feel the tension in him as he prepared to give me away. Just before we reached the altar, he squeezed my hand. "You're sure, Katie?" he whispered, so quietly only I could hear. "I'm sure, Dad," I replied, though something in his eyes made my stomach tighten. The ceremony went flawlessly. It wasn't until the reception that I noticed the first small sign, so small I almost missed it. Graham's mother, Eloise Bennett, cornered me by the champagne fountain, her smile tight and practiced. Her perfume smelled expensive and overwhelming, like flowers preserved under glass. "You'll make him happy, I'm sure," she said, patting my arm. "Though you are a bit mouthy, aren't you? Graham likes to lead, you know. Always has." I laughed it off, chalking it up to wedding day nerves and generational differences. "Oh, we're equals," I assured her. "That's what I love about your son." Eloise's smile never reached her eyes. "Of course, dear." The honeymoon in Santorini was perfect, sun-drenched days exploring the island, nights wrapped in each other's arms in our private villa overlooking the caldera. We talked for hours about our future, the children we might have, the life we would build. "You're my perfect match," Graham whispered one night, his breath warm against my neck. "I've never met anyone who compliments me so well." I didn't notice then how he said compliments rather than completes. The distinction would become important later. The first real cracks appeared 3 months after we returned. We were at a dinner with Graham's colleagues from the financial firm where he worked as a senior investment advisor. I was explaining my perspective on a new educational initiative when Graham placed his hand on mine under the table. "Let me do the talking on this one, honey," he said softly before turning to his colleagues with a polished analysis that ignored most of my points. In the car afterward, I brought it up. "You cut me off back there." "Did I?" He seemed genuinely surprised. "I just thought it would be better if I explained. These are finance people, they respond better to certain approaches." It made sense when he put it that way. He was just looking out for both of us, making sure we made the right impression. Little by little, my world began to narrow. Graham suggested I cut back my hours at the elementary school. "You're always so tired," he said with concern, massaging my shoulders as I graded papers at our kitchen island. "And with my new promotion, we don't need the money. Wouldn't it be nice to focus on making our house a real home?" The suggestion had merit. I was tired. The emotional toll of counseling troubled children left me drained most days. And our beautiful Tudor-style house in the suburbs could use a woman's touch, as Eloise often pointed out when she visited. So I reduced my schedule to part-time, then to consultation only. My colleagues threw me a small goodbye party. My supervisor, Dr. Marquez, pulled me aside. "Are you sure about this, Catherine? You have such a gift with the children." "It's just temporary," I assured her, though Graham and I had never discussed a timeline for my return. Around this time, I had my first significant argument with Dad. He'd invited me for lunch at our favorite diner, just the two of us, like old times. Graham had been hesitant about me going alone. "You shouldn't drive all that way by yourself," he'd said, concern etching his brow. "Let me take you." "Dad wants father-daughter time," I explained. "Besides, I've been driving to Rockwell's diner since I got my license." Graham eventually relented, but his unease lingered in the air as I left. At the diner, Dad and I fell into our old rhythm, him with his black coffee and meatloaf, me with my chocolate milkshake and turkey club. We talked about his garden, my plans for redecorating the sunroom, his neighbor's annoying dog. Then he set down his fork and looked at me directly. "You've lost weight," he observed. "And you're quieter." "I'm fine, Dad," I said, stirring my milkshake. "Just adjusting to married life." "Is that what it is?" His tone was carefully neutral, but I knew him too well. "What are you implying?" He sighed, rubbing his jaw the way he did when choosing his words carefully. "I don't like how he watches you. Controls the conversation. Checks his phone when you're speaking." "He doesn't do that," I snapped, though a voice in the back of my mind whispered that he did. "You're not seeing it clearly, Katie. Or maybe you're just determined not to like him because he's not like you." I fired back. "Not everyone communicates the way you do, Dad. Graham expresses his love differently." Dad's face hardened slightly. "Is that what he's expressing?" I threw my napkin on the table and stood up. "I'm not having this conversation. Graham respects me. He supports me. If you can't see that, then maybe we shouldn't do these lunches for a while." The hurt in Dad's eyes was palpable, but so was his stubbornness. He didn't call after me as I left. We didn't speak for weeks after that. Graham said it was probably for the best. Family can be too involved sometimes, he reasoned. We need space to build our own life. Around the 6-month mark of our marriage, Graham's sister Penelope moved in temporarily, while her condo was being renovated after water damage. Penelope was everything I wasn't, petite, blonde, and deferential to her brother in a way that seemed to please him immensely. "You're so lucky to have him," she told me one afternoon as we prepared dinner. Graham insisted on home-cooked meals, preferably ready when he arrived from work. He's always been the strong one, the provider. We provide for each other, I corrected, dicing onions with more force than necessary. Penelope gave me a pitying smile. Of course. When Graham came home, Penelope transformed, laughing brightly at his jokes, asking his opinion on everything from politics to the proper way to season chicken. With me, when Graham wasn't around, she was coldly polite, her eyes constantly assessing. Graham likes his shirts ironed a specific way, she informed me, watching as I did laundry. Mother taught me how he prefers it. Gradually, our home began to feel less like mine. Graham controlled our finances completely, giving me an allowance for household expenses that I had to account for down to the penny. He began commenting on my clothes, suggesting what would be more appropriate for a financial advisor's wife. He even dictated the weekly menu, claiming certain foods upset his stomach. I found myself mentally tracking his preferences to avoid criticism. Don't wear red. It's too attention-seeking. Don't invite friends over without advance notice. Don't contradict him in front of others. Don't spend money without checking first. One evening, we hosted a dinner for Graham's parents and some family friends. I'd spent all day cooking, cleaning, and arranging everything to Graham's specifications. During dinner, the conversation turned to politics. I offered an opinion that differed slightly from Graham's stance. The table went quiet. Graham smiled tightly and tapped the table lightly with his finger. Men talk, women listen, he said with a chuckle. Isn't that right, Dad? His father laughed heartily. Eloise nodded approvingly. Penelope smirked. I forced a smile, but my heart plummeted to my stomach. In that moment, I caught a glimpse of something ugly beneath the polished surface of our marriage. But even then, I convinced myself I was overreacting. Marriage takes sacrifice, I whispered to myself that night as I scrubbed dishes alone while Graham entertained his family in the living room. Every relationship requires compromise. But as I stared at my reflection in the darkened kitchen window, I couldn't ignore the hollow look in my eyes, or the question forming in the back of my mind. What happened to the independent woman Graham had claimed to respect? I got us something, Graham announced one evening, 6 months into our marriage. He held up his phone, showing me an app with a map display. It's a location-sharing app. For safety. I stared at the screen, where a small blue indicated his current position in our living room. Safety from what? You know, he said, his tone suggesting I was being deliberately obtuse. There have been those car break-ins in the neighborhood. And with me traveling more for work, I want to make sure you're okay. It sounded reasonable. Everything with Graham always sounded reasonable on the surface. I've also upgraded our security system, he continued, guiding me to the hallway. He pointed to a small camera mounted in the corner near the front door. See? One here, one by the back door, one overlooking the driveway. When did you install these? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. This morning while you were at the grocery store. He smiled, wrapping an arm around my waist. Don't worry about the technical stuff. I've got it all set up on my phone. That night, as Graham slept beside me, I lay awake cataloging all the things that had subtly shifted in our relationship. I'd begun keeping a mental list of restrictions, things I wasn't supposed to do or say. Wear red. Interrupt him. Disagree in front of others. Contact friends without telling him. Spend money without permission. The list grew longer each week. Don't answer the door without checking with him first. Don't talk to male neighbors alone. Don't wear makeup when he's not around. Who are you trying to impress? Don't leave dishes in the sink. Don't forget to text when leaving the house. Don't forget to text when arriving somewhere. Some days, I barely recognized myself. I'd never been the type to second-guess my every move, to carefully modulate my voice and opinions to avoid conflict. I'd been raised by a man who valued honesty and strength, who taught me to stand my ground. You have a voice, Katie girl, Dad used to tell me. Never let anyone tell you to silence it. But here I was, practically tiptoeing through my own home, watching Graham's face for signs of disapproval. One afternoon, I was preparing for a charity event Graham's firm was hosting. I'd chosen a navy blue dress that I thought was appropriately conservative. Penelope appeared in my bedroom doorway, leaning against the frame with her arms crossed. Not that one, she said flatly. I turned, dress held against me. Excuse me? Graham hates boat necklines. Makes women's shoulders look too broad. She walked into my closet without invitation and pulled out a beige sheath dress. This is more appropriate. I think I know what my husband prefers, I said, trying to keep the edge from my voice. Penelope raised an eyebrow. Do you? Because I've known him his entire life. Before I could respond, Graham appeared behind her, adjusting his cufflinks. His eyes moved from the navy dress to the beige one in Penelope's hands. Good choice, Pen, he said approvingly. The beige will be perfect, Catherine. At the event that evening, I stood silently beside Graham as he worked the room, introducing me as my wife, without using my name half the time. I smiled and nodded at appropriate intervals, playing the role of the supportive spouse. When one of Graham's colleagues, a man named Jack with kind eyes and a genuine smile, engaged me in conversation about my former work in education, I felt myself coming alive again. That's fascinating, Jack said after I explained a program I developed for children with anxiety. My sister works in child psychology. I'd love to put you two in touch. Before I could respond, Penelope appeared at my elbow. Catherine, Eloise is looking for you. As I excused myself, I caught Penelope whispering something to Graham, her eyes darting toward Jack. Graham's expression darkened. Later that night, as we prepared for bed, the storm broke. Penelope says you were flirting with Jack Coleman, Graham said, his voice dangerously calm. What? No, we were discussing education psychology. She said you were leaning in, touching his arm, laughing too loudly. I stared at him in disbelief. We were having a professional conversation. I never touched him. Graham loosened his tie with deliberate movements. You embarrass me tonight, Catherine. Acting like that in front of my colleagues. Acting like what? Like a human being with thoughts and interests. His eyes flashed. Don't be dramatic. It's unattractive. That night, after Graham fell asleep, I crept downstairs to the guest bathroom, the only place without a security camera. I sat on the cold tile floor and sobbed silently into a towel. The next morning, I tried texting my best friend Ava, who I hadn't seen in months. We'd been close since college, but Graham had increasingly made it difficult to maintain the friendship, claiming Ava was a bad influence who didn't respect our marriage. Me, can we meet for coffee? Need to talk. Ava. OMG, yes. Tomorrow 10 a.m. at Bean There? Been worried about you, me. Perfect. Thank you. I deleted the conversation immediately, but not quickly enough. That evening, Graham confronted me with his phone in hand. Who's Ava? And why are you meeting her? My blood ran cold. You're monitoring my texts. He didn't deny it. As your husband, I have a right to know who you're communicating with. That's an invasion of privacy, Graham. His laugh was dismissive. Privacy? We're married, Catherine. We're one unit. He tapped on his phone and showed me the screen. I've deleted her contact. You won't be meeting her tomorrow or any other day. That night, I began writing in a journal, a simple notebook I bought secretly during a grocery trip and hid in the floor vent of our guest bathroom. I wrote frantically, tears blurring my vision. I don't recognize my life anymore. How did I get here? When did I become this shadow person who jumps at her husband's every command? I used to counsel children about standing up for themselves, about recognizing healthy relationships. What a hypocrite I've become. Graham isn't the man I married. Or maybe he is, and I just couldn't see it. The control, the monitoring, the isolation, it's getting worse. Penelope watches me like a hawk, reporting every move back to him. I feel like I'm living in a beautiful prison. I miss Dad. I miss his quiet strength, his unwavering moral compass. He saw something in Graham that I refused to see. Now I'm afraid to reach out to him, afraid to admit he was right. The journal became my lifeline, the one place I could be honest, the one space that was truly mine. I wrote in it whenever I could sneak away, hiding it carefully after each entry. One afternoon, I came home from the grocery store to find Penelope in my bedroom, rifling through my drawers. What are you doing? I demanded, my voice sharper than it had been in months. She didn't even flinch. Just tidying up. In my underwear drawer? Penelope straightened, brushing invisible lint from her immaculate blouse. Just making sure you're not hiding anything dangerous. Dangerous? What could possibly be dangerous in my underwear drawer? She shrugged, her smile cold. Who knows what secrets people keep? Graham asked me to keep an eye on things while he's at work. For your own good, of course. That evening, I lied to Graham for the first time, claiming I had a dentist appointment the next morning. Instead, I used a prepaid phone I'd purchased secretly to contact Ava. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop across town, far from anywhere Graham might have associates. When I saw Ava sitting at the corner table, her familiar face creased with concern, I nearly broke down. She stood to hug me, then pulled back, her eyes widening. Catherine, your skin and bones. What's going on? For the next hour, I poured out everything, the control, the surveillance, the isolation, Penelope's watchful presence, the complete loss of my independence. Ava listened, her expression shifting from shock to horror to anger. This isn't a marriage, she said finally, gripping my hands across the table. This is abuse, Catherine. He's never hit me, I said automatically, the defense sounding hollow even to my own ears. Abuse isn't just physical. What he's doing, controlling your movements, your communications, your appearance, that's coercive control. It's still abuse. She reached into her purse and slipped me a business card. This is a private therapist who specializes in domestic abuse. She uses discreet billing practices. Please call her. I tucked the card into my bra, where I knew Penelope wouldn't search.
I'm scared, Ava.
I know, she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. But you're stronger than you think. You always have been. The following weekend, Graham's parents came for dinner. As I served the meal, prepared exactly to Eloise's specifications, Graham began telling a story about a presentation I'd supposedly messed up while helping him prepare. She just couldn't grasp the concept, he said, chuckling. I had to redo the entire thing at midnight. The story was a complete fabrication. I'd never helped with that presentation. But when I opened my mouth to correct him, he shot me a warning glance. You embarrass me again, Catherine, he said, his voice deceptively gentle. Are you really this slow? His parents exchanged glances, but said nothing. Penelope smirked into her wine glass. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I stood in the bathroom, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me had dark circles under her eyes and a perpetual crease of worry between her brows. I barely recognized myself. I miss you, Dad, I whispered to my reflection. I reached for my phone several times, wanting to call him, to hear his reassuring voice. But each time I stopped myself. What would I say? How could I admit how completely I'd lost myself? In the quiet darkness of that bathroom, with only my broken reflection for company, I finally acknowledged the truth. I was trapped in a marriage that was slowly suffocating me. And I had no idea how to escape. Spring had just arrived, bringing with it a tentative warmth and the promise of renewal. I was in the kitchen preparing Graham's favorite Sunday breakfast, eggs Benedict with hollandaise sauce made precisely the way his mother had taught me, when he walked in, scrolling through his phone. I see Ava Henderson is having a baby shower next weekend, he said casually, though there was nothing casual about the fact that he knew this information. I assume you received an invitation. My hand trembled slightly as I whisked the hollandaise. Yes, it came last week. You won't be attending, he stated, not looking up from his phone. I stopped whisking. What? You heard me. You don't need those friends poisoning your mind. He finally glanced up, his expression mild but his eyes hard. We have plans that weekend anyway. What plans? I asked, knowing full well we had nothing scheduled. Does it matter? I said no. His tone was final, brooking no argument. Something inside me, some last remnant of the woman I used to be, flared to life. Ava is my oldest friend. She's having her first baby. I should be there. Graham set his phone down with deliberate care. Catherine, we've talked about this. Those college friends of yours don't understand our life, our values. They fill your head with nonsense. It's a baby shower, Graham, not a political rally. He moved closer, his height suddenly intimidating as he towered over me. I said no. And I say I'm going. The words escaped before I could stop them, a declaration of independence I hadn't planned. The change in his demeanor was immediate and frightening. His face flushed with anger, and he slammed his palm against the kitchen counter, making me jump. The wooden spoon I'd been using clattered to the floor. Don't raise your voice, Catherine. His words came through clenched teeth. Just obey. That word, obey, hit me like a physical blow. It stripped away the last of my illusions about our marriage. This wasn't love. This wasn't partnership. This was ownership. I stepped back, bumping against the stove. You've never spoken to me like that before. A cold smile twisted his lips. Haven't I? Maybe you're finally listening. He turned and strode from the kitchen, leaving me shaking beside the stove. The hollandaise sauce had separated, ruined like so much else in my life. That night, hidden in the guest bathroom with the shower running to mask any sound, I wrote frantically in my journal. He's not the man I married. He's a stranger in my house. Or maybe he was always this man and I just wouldn't see it. Today he told me to obey him, like I'm a dog or a child. I can't live like this anymore. I won't. For 3 days, I moved through the house like a ghost, careful to maintain the appearance of submission while my mind raced with possibilities. Graham seemed pleased by my apparent surrender, becoming almost affectionate again, rewarding my compliance with small gestures of approval. Penelope watched me suspiciously, sensing something had changed. You're awfully quiet lately, she observed as we prepared dinner one evening, Graham working late at the office. Just tired, I replied, keeping my eyes on the vegetables I was chopping. She didn't sound convinced. Graham says you've been more cooperative. It's about time you understood your place in this family. I said nothing, focusing on the rhythmic motion of the knife against the cutting board, imagining each slice was cutting through the invisible chains that bound me to this house, this life. That night, after Graham and Penelope had gone to bed, I slipped out to the garage with the excuse of retrieving something from my car. In reality, I needed to make a phone call from a place without surveillance cameras. I dialed the number on the card Ava had given me. After 3 rings, a professional voice answered. Dr. Linford's office. I need an appointment, I whispered, crouched beside my car in the darkened garage. As soon as possible. We have an opening tomorrow at 2 p.m., the receptionist replied. Name? I hesitated, then gave a false name, Sarah Johnson, remembering Ava's mention of discreet billing practices. Address for billing? I'll pay cash, I said firmly. There was a brief pause. Understood. Dr. Linford sees patients at 1824 Maple Street, Suite 302. Please use the side entrance marked Professional Services. The next day, I told Graham I needed to go grocery shopping for a special dinner I was planning. He seemed pleased by my initiative, even offering to let me use his credit card instead of the usual household account with its limited funds. Getting back to your old self, I see, he commented, kissing my forehead in a gesture that once would have warmed me but now made my skin crawl. Dr. Linford's office was in a nondescript building housing various medical and therapeutic practices. I parked several blocks away and walked, constantly checking over my shoulder for any sign of Penelope or one of Graham's associates. The therapist herself was nothing like I expected, a petite woman in her 50s with cropped silver hair and penetrating eyes behind stylish glasses. Her office was warm, with comfortable furniture and soft lighting that immediately put me at ease. Sarah Johnson? She asked, though something in her expression told me she knew it wasn't my real name. Catherine, I corrected once the door was closed. Catherine Whitaker Bennett. She nodded, gesturing for me to sit. Catherine, why don't you tell me what brought you here today? For the next hour, I poured out my story, the gradual isolation, the surveillance, the control over my appearance, my movements, my relationships. With each revelation, Dr. Linford's expression grew more concerned, though she maintained a professional composure. When I finished, she leaned forward slightly. Catherine, what you're describing isn't just controlling behavior. Based on what you've told me, you're experiencing coercive control, a pattern of behavior that strips away your autonomy and independence. It's a form of domestic abuse. Though Ava had said the same thing, hearing it from a professional hit differently. Tears spilled down my cheeks. "But he's never hit me," I whispered, the same defense I'd given Ava. "Abuse isn't always physical," Dr. Linford said gently. "Sometimes the invisible chains are the strongest. The surveillance, isolation, financial control, constant criticism. These are all abuse tactics designed to maintain power and control." She handed me a tissue. "What's most concerning is that these situations often escalate, especially when the abuser senses their victim is pulling away or seeking help." "What do I do?" My voice sounded small, even to my own ears. "That depends on what you want, Catherine. But first, we need to focus on your safety." By the end of the session, I had a safety plan and a follow-up appointment scheduled for the following week. Dr. Linford had also given me resources about domestic abuse and coercive control, which I carefully hid in a reusable grocery bag beneath actual groceries. As I drove home, a new sense of clarity washed over me. For months, I'd been gaslighting myself, convincing myself that I was overreacting, that marriage simply required sacrifices. Now I understood that what was happening wasn't normal or healthy. It was abuse, carefully disguised as love and concern. That night, I began recording Graham's controlling behavior. Using the prepaid phone I'd purchased, I secretly recorded his rants about my failings, his rules for my behavior, his threats thinly veiled as concern. I saved these recordings to a hidden flash drive I kept in a tampon box, the one place I knew neither Graham nor Penelope would look. The next evening, Graham came home in a foul mood. He slammed his briefcase on the kitchen counter, his face thunderous. "Where did this come from?" he demanded, holding up a cookbook I'd purchased weeks ago and hidden in the pantry behind cans of soup. "I bought it last month," I said, careful to keep my voice neutral. "I thought you might enjoy some new recipes." "Without asking me? Without checking if we could afford it?" He flipped through the pages roughly. "This isn't a free-for-all, Catherine. Every purchase needs to be approved." "It was $12, Graham," I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "From my own allowance." His eyes narrowed at my tone. "That's not the point. The point is that you're being secretive. What else are you hiding from me?" As he continued his tirade, I slipped my hand into my pocket and pressed record on the hidden phone. His voice grew louder, his accusations more irrational. He was no longer the charming, composed man who had wooed me. This was his true face, red with anger, control slipping as he sensed my subtle rebellion. That night, as Graham slept beside me, I made my decision. I couldn't continue living this way, walking on eggshells in my own home, erasing myself bit by bit to appease a man who would never be satisfied. I needed help, and there was only one person I trusted completely to provide it. The next day, while Graham was at work and Penelope was at her weekly hair appointment, I took my prepaid phone into the farthest corner of the backyard, where the security cameras couldn't reach. With shaking fingers, I dialed a number I knew by heart, but hadn't called in months. After 3 rings, it went to voicemail. "Charles Whitaker, retired agent. Leave a message." The sound of my father's voice, strong, steady, unchanged, nearly undid me. I took a deep breath, fighting back tears. "Dad." My voice trembled. "I need help. Please don't ask questions. Just come." I ended the call, tucking the phone back into my pocket just as the back door opened. I turned to see Graham standing on the patio, watching me with suspicious eyes. He'd come home early, breaking his usual routine. "Who are you talking to?" he growled, descending the steps toward me. My heart hammered against my ribs. "No one. I was just getting some air." "Don't lie to me, Catherine." He was close enough now that I could see the muscle twitching in his jaw, a warning sign I'd learned to fear. "I saw you on the phone." In that moment, staring into his cold, demanding eyes, I realized how far I'd fallen, and how much further I might fall if I didn't find a way out. The fear in my eyes must have been obvious, because a small, satisfied smile curved his lips. "We'll discuss this inside," he said quietly.
Now.
As I followed him into the house, A new emotion replaced the fear, determination. I had made my call. Help was coming. All I had to do now was survive until it arrived. The morning after my desperate call to Dad, I moved through the house with careful precision, my face a mask of subservience. Graham watched me closely, his eyes following my movements as I prepared his breakfast and laid out his clothes for the day. After a confrontation in the yard, he'd interrogated me for an hour about who I might have been calling. I'd stuck to my story. I was just getting air, admiring the garden, talking to myself about planting ideas. He didn't believe me, but he couldn't prove otherwise. My prepaid phone was safely hidden in the lining of an old winter boot in the attic storage. "You seem different today," Graham observed as he adjusted his tie in the hallway mirror. "Nervous." I forced a smile. "Just tired. I didn't sleep well." "Perhaps you should rest today," he suggested, his tone deceptively considerate. "Stay home. Don't go anywhere." The instruction was clear beneath the veneer of concern. He wanted me contained, where Penelope could watch me. "I thought I might reorganize the linen closet," I said meekly, giving him exactly what he wanted, a woman too broken to fight back. Graham's shoulders relaxed slightly. He leaned in to kiss my cheek, his cologne enveloping me like a too heavy blanket. "That's my good girl." After he left for work, Penelope emerged from the guest room, already dressed in a crisp blouse and tailored pants despite having nowhere to go. "I'll be around all day," she announced, pouring herself coffee. "In case you need help with anything." In case I tried to escape, she meant. "Actually," I said, keeping my voice light, "I was wondering if you could help me plan a dinner for this weekend. Maybe invite your parents?" Graham's been working so hard lately. The suggestion pleased her, an opportunity to assert her superior knowledge of her brother's preferences. For the next hour, we discussed menu options and seating arrangements, Penelope gleefully vetoing most of my ideas. "Graham hates salmon," she corrected when I suggested it. "And Mother can't abide garlic. Better stick with the roast chicken they both love." I nodded docilely, playing my part. Inside, I was calculating days, hours, minutes. How long would it take Dad to receive my message? How long to make arrangements? Would he come alone or bring help? The next day passed in excruciating slowness. Graham's behavior had softened slightly, as it always did after he'd asserted his control. He brought me flowers, white lilies that reminded me of funeral arrangements, and suggested we watch a movie together. "You pick," he said magnanimously, though we both knew he would veto anything that didn't align with his tastes. By Friday, the family dinner I'd suggested was in full swing. Eloise had arrived early to critique my table setting and rearrange the flowers I'd carefully selected. Graham's father, Howard, settled in the living room with a scotch, making occasional booming comments about politics and the way things should be. I wore the beige dress Penelope had selected, my hair styled exactly as Graham preferred. I'd become an expert at this performance, the dutiful wife, the gracious hostess, the woman with no thoughts of her own. As we gathered around the dining table, gleaming with Eloise's preferred china and crystal, I felt a strange sense of calm. This might be the last time I would sit at this table, in this house, pretending to be someone I wasn't. Graham was in rare form, bolstered by his father's approving presence and his third glass of wine. He dominated the conversation, speaking over everyone, particularly me. "Business is booming," he announced, carving the roast chicken with precise movements. "The Wilson account alone will bring in 6 figures this quarter." "Brilliant work, son." Howard nodded approvingly. "Always knew you had the touch." "Couldn't do it without proper support at home," Graham replied, gesturing toward me with the carving knife. "Finally got Catherine trained up right." Eloise tittered behind her napkin. "It did take some time. She was rather independent when you married her." "Some women need a firmer hand," Howard added, his voice slightly slurred. "Nothing wrong with keeping them in line." Graham smiled, lifting his wine glass in a mock toast. "She finally learned to shut up. Makes life much more peaceful." The table erupted in appreciative laughter. Penelope leaned forward, her eyes glittering with malice. She was like a wild cat at first, but now she purrs when he says sit. I felt tears pooling in my eyes, but I blinked them back. "Excuse me," I murmured, rising from the table. "I need some water." In the kitchen, I gripped the edge of the counter, taking deep breaths. I checked my phone, a new one Graham had given me after mysteriously losing my previous one. No messages. Dad hadn't tried to contact me through official channels, which was both disappointing and reassuring. He was being careful. As I filled a glass with tap water, I heard the doorbell ring. My heart leapt into my throat. Who the hell comes during dinner? Howard's irritated voice carried from the dining room. I moved quickly back toward the foyer, but Graham was already heading for the door, annoyance etched on his face. "It's probably those neighborhood kids selling something again." He swung open the door, and time seemed to stop. My father stood on the doorstep, tall and imposing in a charcoal gray suit that I recognized from formal occasions throughout my childhood. His silver hair was neatly combed, his posture straight as ever. In one hand, he carried a slim leather folder. "Hi, Katie," he said, his warm voice washing over me like a healing balm. He looked past Graham directly to where I stood frozen in the foyer. "Can we talk?" Graham's body stiffened. "Charles," he said coolly, "this isn't a good time. We're having a family dinner." Dad didn't acknowledge him. His eyes remained fixed on me, question in them. "I wasn't asking you," Dad finally said, stepping past Graham into the house with the easy confidence of a man who had spent decades walking into places where he wasn't welcome. Howard appeared in the dining room doorway, his face flushed with wine and indignation. "What's the meaning of this interruption?" Dad turned slowly, taking in the scene, Howard's belligerent stance, Eloise's pinched expression as she peered around her husband, Penelope's wide eyes. He looked back at me, and I saw the moment he registered everything, my too thin frame, the fear in my eyes, the beige dress I would never have chosen for myself. "I know everything," Dad said quietly, his voice carrying in the sudden silence. He gestured toward the dining room. "Let's all sit down, shall we?" The dining room crackled with tension. I'd never seen Graham truly rattled before, but my father's unexpected arrival had disrupted his carefully constructed control. Graham sat at the head of the table, his knuckles white around his wine glass, trying to project authority even as it slipped from his grasp. "What exactly is this about?" Graham demanded, his voice tight. "You show up unannounced during a private family dinner." "This is about my daughter," Dad interrupted calmly. He remained standing, the leather folder placed precisely on the table before him. Graham scoffed, regaining some of his composure. "What? Are you here to rescue her? She's a grown woman, Charles, not some damsel in distress." Dad didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he opened the folder with deliberate movements. "Actually, I'm here to inform you of a federal inquiry. And to get my daughter." His words hung in the air like smoke. Federal inquiry. The phrase seemed to physically impact Graham, whose face paled slightly. Penelope, never one to read a room correctly, snorted from her seat beside Eloise. "You don't have the authority to be here. You're retired." Dad turned his gaze to her, his expression unchanged but somehow more intimidating for its calmness. "I helped write the manual you're quoting. Now sit down." Penelope's mouth snapped shut. She glanced at Graham, clearly expecting him to intervene, but he remained silent, eyes fixed on the folder Dad had placed on the table. Eloise cleared her throat, her society manners kicking in as she attempted to regain control of the situation. "Mr. Whitaker, while we understand your concern for Catherine, I'm sure this is all a misunderstanding that doesn't require such dramatic intervention." Dad didn't acknowledge her directly. Instead, he reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket and withdrew a small voice recorder. With a deliberate press of a button, Graham's voice filled the room. "Don't need those friends poisoning your mind."
You heard me.
I said no. My own voice, smaller but clearly defiant. "Ava is my oldest friend. She's having her first baby. I should be there." Graham again, his tone menacing. "Don't raise your voice, Catherine. Just obey." Dad stopped the recording. "Courtesy of the new whistleblower laws," he said evenly. "There's about 6 hours more of this. Interesting listening." Graham lunged forward, reaching for the recorder. Give me that. I'd suggest you don't touch evidence. The new voice came from the doorway. I turned to see a tall man with close-cropped salt and pepper hair, his expression professionally neutral. Though older than I remembered, I recognized him immediately. Agent Michael Trevino, my father's former partner. He stepped into the dining room, his badge visible on his belt. Evidence. Howard blustered, finding his voice at last. Evidence of what? A marital disagreement? This is absurd. Actually, Agent Trevino said, his tone conversational, it's evidence in an investigation of coercive control and psychological abuse, which, as of last year, is a federal offense when it crosses certain thresholds. Financial manipulation, surveillance without consent, isolation from family and friends, those thresholds have been met. My hands were shaking under the table. I felt lightheaded, as though I might float away from the scene unfolding before me. Dad must have sensed this because he moved to the chair beside me, his solid presence anchoring me to reality. You've been keeping this in for a long time, he said gently, his voice meant only for me. You don't have to anymore. Graham laughed nervously, attempting to regain control of the situation. This is all exaggerated. She's dramatic. Always has been. For the first time since my father arrived, I found my voice. You tracked me.
Controlled me.
Humiliated me in front of your family. I reached into the pocket of my dress and pulled out my phone. With trembling fingers, I opened the Notes app where I'd secretly transcribed entries from my hidden journal. March 10th, I read aloud. Graham has cameras in every room now except the bathrooms. He says it's for security, but he watches me when he's at work. Called today to ask why I was lingering by the window too long. I was watering the plants. I scrolled down. April 2nd. Penelope went through my underwear drawer again. When I confronted her, she said Graham asked her to check for contraband. My own home feels like a prison. April 15th. Graham took my credit card. Said I was irresponsible for spending $40 on books. He spent $300 on whiskey last week. With each entry I read, I felt layers of fear falling away. Each word was a step toward reclaiming the voice that had been silenced for so long. Penelope interrupted, her face contorted with disdain. She's lying. She's always been jealous of Graham's family, always trying to come between us. We've actually subpoenaed your texts too, Agent Trevino cut in smoothly. Want to hear what you said about her behind her back? Penelope blanched, her gaze darting to Graham in panic. April 8th. Trevino quoted from a small notebook. The mouse tried to use the landline today when she thought I wasn't looking. Don't worry, I disconnected it yesterday. April 12th. She was in the bathroom too long. Might be hiding something in there. We'll check when she's asleep. Eloise pushed back from the table, her perfectly maintained facade cracking for the first time. This is a private family matter, she hissed. You're ruining our family name. Dad looked at her with quiet contempt. You ruined it the day you taught your son that power equals cruelty. Graham's composure finally shattered completely. He stood, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. This is ridiculous. You can't just barge in here with wild accusations and... Sit down, Mr. Bennett, Trevino said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Unless you'd prefer to continue this conversation at the federal building downtown. Graham sank back into his chair, his face a mask of barely controlled rage and growing fear. Dad turned to me, his expression softening. You have two choices tonight, Katie. Stay here and be silent, or come with me and take your voice back. The decision was already made. I rose without hesitation, looking directly at Graham for what I hoped would be the last time. I'm done obeying. Dad's house hadn't changed in the 18 months since I'd last been there. The same worn leather sofa sat in the living room, the same faded curtains hung in the windows, the same coffee pot, ancient but reliable, gurgled in the kitchen each morning. It smelled the same too, coffee, old books, and the faint trace of the woodworking oil Dad used in his garage workshop. The guest room, my old room, was exactly as I'd left it. Dad had preserved it like a time capsule, right down to the photograph of me at high school graduation still taped to the mirror. The girl in that photo looked back at me with clear eyes and a confident smile, unaware of how thoroughly she would lose herself to a man who promised love but delivered control. That first night, Dad didn't press me for details. He simply showed me to my room, squeezed my shoulder once, and said, "Get some sleep, Katie girl. We'll figure it out tomorrow." I slept for 12 hours straight, the deepest sleep I'd had in months, perhaps years. When I woke, sunlight was streaming through the windows, and the smell of bacon wafted up from the kitchen. For a moment, I tensed, panicked that I'd overslept and Graham would be angry. Then reality washed over me. I was safe. I was home. Downstairs, Dad was methodically preparing breakfast, moving around the kitchen with the same efficiency he brought to everything. He nodded when I appeared in the doorway, but didn't comment on my rumpled appearance or the dark circles under my eyes. "Breakfast in 5, he said simply, sliding bacon onto a paper towel to drain. We ate in comfortable silence, the only sound the scrape of forks against plates and the occasional rustle of Dad's newspaper. No criticisms about my appetite or a lecture about proper table manners. Just quiet acceptance. After breakfast, Dad drove us to a nondescript office building downtown. "There are people who can help," was all he said as we pulled into the parking lot. Inside, we were met by 2 women. The first introduced herself as Megan Donovan, a legal advocate specializing in domestic abuse cases. The second was Dr. Linford, my secret therapist who now greeted me openly, her kind eyes filled with professional concern. "Catherine," Dr. Linford said warmly, "I'm glad you're here. Truly here this time." For the next 3 hours, I talked. I told them everything: the gradual isolation, the financial control, the surveillance, the constant criticism that had whittled away my self-worth until I barely recognized myself. Dad didn't interject or ask questions. He simply sat beside me, his presence solid and unwavering. When I described the cameras Graham had installed throughout the house, Dad's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. When I mentioned being forbidden from contacting him, his hand clenched once on the table. But he never interrupted, never made the moment about his anger rather than my experience. After I finished, Megan outlined the legal options available to me. "Based on what you've told us, we have grounds for a domestic abuse report, potentially leading to charges of coercive control and unlawful surveillance." "What do you need from me?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected.
"A formal statement," she replied.
"And permission to access the evidence your father and Agent Trevino have gathered." I nodded, though the thought of putting it all on record, making official what I'd kept hidden for so long, sent a wave of anxiety through me. "You don't have to decide everything today," Dr. Linford assured me. "This is just the beginning of the process." Later that afternoon, Agent Trevino stopped by Dad's house with an update. He and Dad spoke in low voices on the front porch while I waited in the living room, straining to hear. "Penelope Bennett is being charged with tampering and slander," Trevino reported. "The texts we recovered show clear intent to isolate and monitor Catherine without her consent." "And Eloise?" Dad asked. "Issued a legal summons for harassment during medical inquiries. She apparently called Catherine's former doctor multiple times, pretending to be her, canceling appointments and requesting information."
I hadn't known about that.
The revelation sent a chill down my spine. How much else had happened behind my back? "Graham?" Dad's voice was carefully neutral. "Under investigation for coercive abuse and unlawful surveillance. The recordings Catherine made are damning, Charles. So are the security logs from those cameras he installed. He was watching her every move." Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You'll regret this." My hands trembled as I showed it to Dad and Trevino. Without a word, Trevino took a photo of the message and added it to his file. "He's digging his own grave," he said grimly. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings, therapy sessions, and quiet evenings with Dad. Gradually, I began to reclaim pieces of myself. Small things at first, like choosing what to wear without second-guessing every decision, or eating what I wanted without counting calories or worrying about Graham's preferences. I started working again, not in my old school, but at a shelter for women and children, counseling young girls who had experienced emotional abuse. My first session with a 14-year-old named Lily broke my heart and healed it simultaneously. No one believed me, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. They said I was making it up for attention. I squeezed her hand gently. I do, I told her. I believe every word. The community's reaction to my situation was mixed. Some expressed shock that such a nice man could behave that way. Others quietly shared that they had seen signs, but hadn't known how to help. A few former friends admitted they'd been pushed away by Graham's controlling behavior and had eventually stopped trying to reach me. I held my head high through it all. At the grocery store, where I once would have hunched my shoulders and avoided eye contact, I now nodded politely to acquaintances and made small talk with cashiers. No more hiding. Penelope was the first to face legal consequences. The evidence against her was overwhelming. Texts to Graham detailing my movements, admissions of tampering with my personal belongings, even screenshots of emails she'd intercepted by accessing my accounts. Eloise received a formal censure for her role in enabling Graham's behavior and her own harassment. She was ordered to have no contact with me for a minimum of 2 years. Graham himself fought the charges vigorously, hiring an expensive attorney who specialized in family disputes. But the evidence continued to mount. The recordings I'd made, the security logs from his cameras, testimony from Ava and Dr. Linford about the changes they'd observed in me, even financial records showing how he'd systematically cut off my access to resources. The day of the restraining order hearing arrived 6 weeks after I'd left the house. Dad attended with me, wearing the same charcoal suit he'd worn the night he came to get me. It was also the suit he'd worn to my high school and college graduations, his important occasions outfit. In the courtroom, Graham avoided my gaze, staring straight ahead with the same controlled expression he'd perfected over years of business negotiations. But I could see the tension in his jaw, the slight tremor in his hands as he shuffled papers on the defense table. When the judge granted the restraining order, barring Graham from coming within 500 feet of me, my workplace, or Dad's home, tears sprang to my eyes. Not tears of fear or sadness, but of profound relief. The legal system had heard me. It had believed me. It had protected me. That evening, Dad and I ate dinner in a small kitchen, the overhead light casting a warm glow over the simple meal we'd prepared together. The silence between us was comfortable, full of unspoken understanding rather than tension. I looked up from my plate to find him watching me, his expression thoughtful. "Thank you, Dad," I said softly, "for being exactly who you used to be." He nodded, the corner of his mouth lifting in the barest hint of a smile. "No, Katie," he replied, his voice gruff with emotion. "Thank you for finally remembering who you are." As I helped clear the dishes, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the kitchen window. The woman looking back at me wasn't the same as the girl in the graduation photo. She was older, wiser, with shadows in her eyes that hadn't been there before. But the set of her shoulders was straight again, her gaze clear and direct. I had survived. I had escaped. And now, one day at a time, I was reclaiming my voice, my independence, and my life. Have you ever wondered what happens when the person you silenced finally finds their voice again? Like, comment, and subscribe for more stories about reclaiming power from those who never deserved it in the first place.